The Electric State, or How to Make a Movie Based Off an Algorithm, is an uninspired, wholly derivative piece of content right at home amid the vast array of forgettable streaming fare plastered across the vast and unmemorable Netflix catalog. It's an unashamed ripoff of Amblin classics, desperately clutching at Spielbergian magic, but instead of soaring on the wings of wonder, it plods along from one obligatory CGI set piece to the next. Utterly inoffensive and saccharine to the extreme, the Russo brothers have turned out the cinematic equivalent of lukewarm oatmeal, technically edible, but devoid of flavor, texture, and almost anything remotely interesting. On the other hand, at least it looks good.
I am not dying of Marky Mark and the Funky Bunch!
I actually like this song.
The Electric State takes place in the aftermath of a war with robots in an altered timeline. Robots who were initially created by Walt Disney and used as company mascots, but who rebelled in the early 1990s when denied their own autonomy and rights. There may yet be a timeline when Disney bots try to take over the world. And if you've ever read the comments for anything critical of a Marvel property, you may have encountered some of them already. The momentum of the war turns when a tech genius invents mechanized avatars for people to pilot via neurosensory helmets, which look and play out in the movie in a suspiciously similar way to the headgear in Ready Player One. The war comes to a conclusion when the spokesman for the robots, Mr. Peanut, voiced by Woody Harrelson, signs a treaty with Bill Clinton, presumably sometime before Monica Lewinsky's dress developed that mysterious stain. This results in the robots being confined to an exclusionary zone, while being outlawed everywhere else. Cut to 1994 and Millie Bobby Brown, who's living in a foster home as a result of her parents and brother being killed. Not by robots in the recent war, but by hitting a random deer on the road. When a robot that can only speak in catchphrases based off the Cosmo mascot breaks into her room and signals that it contains the consciousness of her beloved brother, who's somehow still alive. This sparks an adventure to find where his body is and reunite his digitized consciousness with his physical form. Along the way, they'll have to avoid being hunted down by the ex-military hero, the Butcher of Schenectady, played by Giancarlo Esposito, sneak into the exclusionary zone with the help of another sympathetic ex-soldier, Keats, played by Chris Pratt, and his robot buddy Herman, voiced by Anthony Mackie, and navigate the hostile territory while gaining unlikely allies and confronting the cold-hearted tech bro who's turned humanity into a bunch of vegetables and relegated the robotic population to little better than a refugee camp. To say that this film borrows from other movies, especially Steven Spielberg and Niell Blomkamp pictures, would be a gross understatement. You've got shades of E.T. and other childhood adventure movies, tonally speaking, overt copying of Ready Player One, and bits of Wall-E, with the neural interfaces and reduction of humanity to lazy blobs lost in the digital world. There's a bit of Chappie in the digital consciousness upload, District 9 in terms of the oppressed robotic population, and Elysium in Esposito's mercenary character and the mechanized suits. Chris Pratt's character is a stand-in for Star-Lord, which in itself has become somewhat of a trope by now. Millie Bobby Brown's character is an angsty teen like in any other teen-focused movie, in the right all along and vindicated by the end. Any sci-fi movie or show about wars with robots can be found in the core premise of the story, and so on. The overall theme and plot are what give this movie such a derivative feeling. Bits and pieces can be found everywhere in the sci-fi and adventure moviescape. You wouldn't be blamed for thinking this was written by ChatGPT. I mean, it probably was. It's a mishmash of everything, just that everything else has been done better before. Millie Bobby Brown attempts a performance, but whether it was poor direction or a simple lack of talent on her part, her acting just isn't very convincing. I don't think I've ever seen her outside of Stranger Things, but she did a hell of a lot better job in that than she does here. If I were ever tempted to subject myself to the woke nightmare that Damsel undoubtedly is, her acting in this thing is enough to put that desire to rest. Her character is also annoyingly confident, angry, and fearless, even in the most stressful of situations where little fear and humility would have gone a long way to humanize her. It really rings false and totally cliche. She's utterly thankless and rude to Chris Pratt's character, even as he's bending over backward to help her, with no gain to himself. She's a really unlikable character for me. Her relationship with her brother, which is played up to the extreme in an effort to convince the audience of the love they share, feels entirely forced and awkward. These two have to be the most loving siblings in history. I remember growing up with my sister, also in the 90s, and it was nothing but constant fights and screaming matches, with a few patches of kindness here and there, mainly around Christmas time. I'm not saying you can't have loving siblings, but the way this movie piles it on just feels overdone. Like a lot of other things in this film, it just rings hollow. Chris Pratt does his best to inject some life into this thing, but even he can't overcome the film's relentless mediocrity. Certainly not as a discount Star Lord, which he comes across as the entire movie. His acting's alright. It's just that we've seen this character before, from him no less, and done far better, which only highlights how flat this character feels here. This is like a pale imitation of an imitation. Meanwhile, the robot sidekick Herman feels like it was plucked straight from a committee brainstorming session titled How to Manufacture Nostalgia Without Actually Understanding It. He's a cute enough character, he's just missing something compelling, something deeper than surface level, which is a problem all these characters have. I mean, Ke Huy Quan is relegated to a perfunctory role as a data dump, and quickly discarded in favor of the next overblown set piece, and the next, and the next. The villains, Stanley Tucci as the merciless technocrat, and Giancarlo Esposito as the gun for hire, are both decent, but fail to stand out in a meaningful way. I think Tucci may have done the best job out of the entire cast, pulling off an unscrupulous tech tyrant. It's just that the wonky story and tepid direction don't propel him to any memorable heights. Mr. Peanut and the other robots were probably the most enjoyable part for me, with some decent humor coming from the ragtag group of mechanical survivors. I got a kick out of the hairdresser bot who gets so excited when she finally sees human hair to cut. It's pretty funny.
Hair!
Touch my hair and I'll kill you.
You could use a haircut.
The baseball dude and the magician bot voiced by Hank Azaria aren't bad either. All of the robots have an obvious visual identity, and the mid 1900s aesthetic is pretty fun. There's some good expression of scale and visual flair as well. Sadly, though, as interesting or funny as that theme could have been, the robots end up feeling like the rest of the disparate parts of this movie. Just alright. And though I've never read the visual novel by Simon Stollenhag that this is based on, just from looking at some of the art, this seems like a massive departure from that, tonally speaking. At a reported budget of $320 million, this is the most expensive Netflix movie ever made. And, aside from the star-studded cast, it seems like most of that went to the CGI. I know a lot of people are crapping on this movie, but anyone saying it looks bad needs to have their eyes examined. Maybe the theme isn't that great, but on a technical level, it's pretty good. Clearly a lot of work went into the visual aspect. The robot's appearance, movements, and details are all pretty top-notch. The visual effects are convincing, and nothing looks cheap like some of Marvel's latest efforts, where the CG department clearly skimped on some things.
This was fun! No!
The main issue really stems from the script. As I said at the start, this seems like the result of an algorithm spitting out a script based on the best of Steven Spielberg's efforts, a shallow piece of content aping the far better Amblin movies of the past, without understanding what made them so endearing in the first place. The result? A film so painstakingly engineered to be heartfelt and adventurous that it forgets to have an actual soul. Despite all my complaints, I didn't hate this movie, but there's very little substance to it. The whole thing ends up feeling mediocre. There was a lot of potential there. It just fell through the cracks. I'd give it a 5 out of 10. I have a feeling that the younger crowd might appreciate this more. It's an alright family movie, I'd say. The problem for me, though, is how derivative it all feels, how shallow and contrived the entire plot and characters are. You just can't help seeing all the similarities with other, better movies, or if not better, at least conceptually more adventurous and artistic. This feels like a corporate product. One more atop an ever-growing pile of streaming movies, which will no doubt be quickly forgotten as soon as the next piece of content arrives in short order. Well, that's all I've got for now. Let me know what you thought in the comments below. And as always, thanks for watching.